couldn't light candles, weren't keeping the Sabbath? Seriously? If you can't light a candle, that doesn't mean you weren't trying to sanctify it? I said, I think that's a slap in their face. Because I think, what I read is they were trying to keep it, and they didn't have the ability to light candles. So you want to look at their ancestors and tell them, I'm sorry you weren't keeping the Sabbath because they didn't light candles? And he went, okay, fine. And so in good Jewish tradition, we kept both. We're not going to get rid of that one, but we'll add the other one. That's beautiful. That's typical Jewish way of compromise. Yeah. Leave the traditional one there, put the traditional one alternate. Okay? Now, I'm never going to say to anybody, I've never said to anybody, you better light candles or you're not keeping Shabbat. Because there's 1,001 ways. There's 1,001 ways to sanctify the Sabbath and to set it apart. Candles are one way, not the only way. Okay? Hope I'm making my point. Good. All right. Now, last point to be made. One of the things that the Hebrew Scripture often takes a hit on, and I heard it this week as well. We're definitely, you read the Hebrew Scriptures, it's definitely a patriarchal culture. There's no doubt. Okay? It's a patriarchal culture. By the way, we think the Moabites were probably a matriarchal culture. Ethiopia turns out to be a patriarchal. Other cultures, matriarch. Certain cultures, patriarchal. Huh? Matriarchal cultures are where mama is key. Mama makes the decisions, and mama is the one who rules the family.
So if mama ain't happy,
mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, right? So that's matriarchal. Patriarchal is where the men make the decisions, and it's a very patriarchal society. Okay, men are the ones. All right. So, so what we have now going on in biblical studies is you have a, and it's been going on for a number of years, a feminist agenda to say, we got to try to turn everything around and show that it was actually, that this was, a bad thing. Okay. So my point is this, to show you that this particular text is interesting because here, 5 women who are unmarried, they come to Moses and they say, hey Moses, this seems really, really messed up. Because when it comes to getting a land inheritance, since our father died and he wasn't in the rebellion, we have no brothers. Our land that would have gone to our father that gives us ability to survive is going to go outside of our family. And God says to Moses, make sure the girls get the land. So this notion that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was somehow against women and didn't like women and was a misogynist, that is one who hates women, is just not true. Here is a classic example of where women came to Moses. By the way, here's one of the things the rabbis say that I'll agree with them on. When you look at the Hebrew Scripture, whenever women petition God for something, and God was on their side, whenever women petition God for something in the Bible, they get it almost immediately. God says, I don't want to make the women unhappy. Don't take off the women. Even the Holy One, bless him, he's like, don't mess with the women. Right? So, if they say, if you want to get your prayer answered, tell your prayer to a woman, have her pray for it, and most likely God will say, okay, fine, a woman asked for it, and I'll give it to her. These girls go to God, they go to Moses, and they say, can we have the land? And God says to Moses, give the girls the land. Now, here's what's interesting. If we were to fast forward to chapter 36, the elders of their tribe come to Moses and say, hey Moses, here's a problem with this particular, by the way, this is now an amendment to what we're seeing here. And Moses doesn't even think about the amendment. The elders of the tribe come to Moses and say, hey Moses, if these girls marry outside our tribe, the land will go to the tribe of the guy they married. So what you need to tell them, Moses, is that they must marry somebody in their own tribe. So that the land doesn't move from this tribe to another tribe when they get married. That won't be good. That'll create all kinds of havoc. So Moses comes back to the girl in chapter 36 of Numbers and says, hey girls, when you marry, you need to make sure you marry within your own tribe. So the land stays in this tribe. And the girls say, not a problem. And we find out that they do marry within their own tribe, and everything's cool. So my point is to say that, you know what, God does care about women. And he does care about the plight of women. He's not discompassionate or uncompassionate, and that women have a special place in his heart. Like I said, every time in the Bible that a woman prays, God says, give it to her. Go for it. I mean, the requests are almost instantaneous. I mean, almost. Think of other examples. Think of women in the Bible who ask God for something, and if you look at the context, almost always they get what they ask for.
Well, the woman that touched Yeshua's garment, she said a little prayer before she did it.
Yeah.
And as soon as she touched,
she was healed. Yeah. Yeah, instantaneous. Anybody else you think of that prayed, women who prayed in the Bible and got what they wanted? Hannah. Yeah, Hannah prayed, and God says, okay, this time next year, since you prayed, you'll have a child. Boom. I mean, I'm just saying, the examples we see in the Bible are pretty much they get what they've asked for. So, what I'm trying to say is that God doesn't hate women. That God loves, he created them, loves them, and that the God of the Old Testament is not against them. All right, any questions or comments on anything we've discussed? We've discussed a lot, or things we didn't discuss in our text. Because chapter 25 was FinCon, chapter 26 was the census, chapter 27 the daughters was Lothicon. Yeah.
I sometimes get into a debate with my sister about why it was so significant that Miriam had to be a virgin. Does that mean that having a child makes you a sinner, kind of thing? And I thought that was a pretty interesting question because, as you said before, the young girl and then didn't know a man. I mean, there is that distinction. I wonder if what would be a good response? I mean, other than what the Bible really, that's what I said. But what is the reason?
Let me give you a paper on this that okay. I think will help you. It lays all this out. Okay. Why it was necessary for the virgin birth.
Okay.
So that's a great question. Very good question. We need to answer it, but yeah.
I need to become, not really something to stop it. Whether they claim that the oral Torah was given on Mount Sinai.
Okay, in Pirkei Avot 1:1, it says that the Torah was given to Moses. Moses gave it to the 70 elders. The 70 elders gave it to this one, and then these gave it to this one. It went to Ezra. Then it went to the Great Assembly. So what they're saying is there's been from Moses to Moses, from Moshe, tribe of Levi, all the way to Moses, what's his name, 13th century, Moshe Maimonides. So you'll hear in the rabbinic mindset, from Moses to Moses, this unbroken chain of oral tradition. Now, here's what's interesting. You would think if there was an unbroken chain of oral transmission, that when we got to the Mishnah and the Talmud, which the Mishnah was written in 200 AD. The Gemara is written about 400, so we have the Talmud coming together in about 500, thereabouts, 500 AD. Now, you would think that when you read the Gemara and the Mishnah, that if you read these together, that somewhere in them you would find, if there was an unbroken chain of oral transmission, that there was history going all the way back to Moses. That it would tell the history of what happened to Moses, way over here. We don't find anything about Moses. We don't find anything about David, other than what the Scripture says. In nothing that was no new information. The Mishnah and the Talmud tell us about what happened in the 1st century and 2nd century. Well, what do you know? That's about the time it was the material for it was being gathered. So it's definitely a child of its time. It doesn't tell us anything about the intertestamental period that we don't already have in writing. It gives us no new information. But yet, it's supposed to be this unbroken chain of transmission, going all the way back to Moses.
It makes it you can't question.
It makes it so. Here's why. Exactly. Because if Moses was given the oral Torah on Mount Sinai, it's equal to the written Torah. See, now we can say, and here's what's said. Anything that the rabbis say in the Mishnah of the Talmud now is equal to what Moses said. So if the rabbis decide to go against him, then okay, so be it. You know, it's all right. So this becomes, and we have rabbis who actually tell people, you know, there are things the Torah commands that I'm going to give you a little bit of a leeway around, a loophole around. So these kind of things happen over and over again. One of the examples in the Talmud that's very interesting is they say, you know what, we need to put down an official ruling on this issue. And so they say, well, what was the ruling that we were supposed to do? Well, what was the ruling that God gave us? And nobody can remember the ruling on how to address this particular issue. And so somebody says, you know what we should do? We should go look at what the people are doing and make that our ruling. And then we'll say that it came from Moses, from Mount Sinai. And so just go look at what the people are doing, because the people, and that way, look, it's beautiful, because then you're not telling them to do anything that they weren't already doing. Very smart. So then they say, we now proclamate that Moses said to do this. And it's like everybody went, okay, that's fine, that's cool, because that's what we were already doing. So they say, look, we don't, you know, and there's, I could just go on and on like this. There's just, it's multitudinous like this. So I think there's too many flaws and too many gaps. It just doesn't work. Now I have a lot of brothers and sisters in the Messianic movement who want me to follow every nuance of Messianic of rabbinic Judaism.
Nope.
And I'm saying, you know what? It will mess us up, because there's so much in there that you just, well, I mean, for instance, there are hundreds of laws on how to keep the Sabbath. I mean, just hundreds. So it becomes so burdensome that nobody even wants to mess with it. Now, the only way Orthodox Judaism is growing is by birth rate, not by people converting. Let me give you an example of this. I've talked with some of the Orthodox women in Seattle and in Israel. A lot of the Orthodox women won't go to shul. They won't go to the synagogue. Here's why. If you pick up your child, in some Orthodox circles, depending on how strict they are, if you pick up your child and he cries on Shabbat, you've lifted a burden. You picked up a load. So if your child goes, you got to go. So what they do is this: women just stay at home. That way they can pick it up, nobody sees it. It's all good. If they came and did it in front of everybody, there'd be all kinds of brouhaha. So they just say, you know what? Easier to stay at home. And is this really what God wanted? That picking up my child is somehow I'm carrying a burden on Shabbat? How about just showing affection and love to a child that God gave me? Missing the point. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, you know, and it's no wonder then that I got to tell you a real quick story. I had a gentleman come to my home who says to me, he's coming there to show me some business products, and he says to me, he says, by the way, he looks around, he says, I'm Jewish. I said, oh, that's really cool. I said, so tell me your story. He says, well, I went to yeshiva for this, you know, for 17 years. I said, well, what happened? You know, now you're selling, business products. I said, so what happened? He goes, dude, he says, man, this guy's in his mid 40s. He says, it was like a burden, man. I couldn't lift it all. I just could not lift it all. This wasn't a guy who hated God. This was a guy who felt, you know what? It's like more and more stuff. It's just like, I can't do it. I can't live this life. And he just went, and I see so many of them tell me, you know what? It just became burdensome and more load and more burden. It's like, you know what? After a while you just go, God, if this is what it takes to please you, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm just going to have to be a bad Jew, and I'm going to have to leave.
I can't do it all.
I can't do it all. I just can't do it all. And here's what was fascinating about that. He said, after telling me all that, saying, look, I just had to walk away from it all. He walks out my door. I open the door for him, the screen door. He walks out, and as he's walking out, he does this to my mezuzah. And I'm thinking to myself, it's still there.
Yep.
It's still there. Intuitively, you reached out and kissed the mezuzah. You don't have a problem with God. You've got a problem with all the other stuff. And I went to see my Jewish doctor, and yeah, I don't go unless they're Jewish. Anyway, no, I'm kidding. So he says to me, I'm wearing a kippah. He says to me, he leans over. I don't know why they always do it in hushed tones. They always do this to me. He says, my doctor. He says, I'm Jewish. I said, that's great. That's always a good way to start out, you know. That's what he says. And he says to me, he says, I'm a festival Jew.
So you need Christian.
Yeah, like Christians go on Easter and Christmas. He's like, I go on Passover and Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
I'm a festival Jew. And the more I talk with him, the more I realize, you know what? You don't have a problem with God. You've got a problem with all this stuff. So,
Yeah.
you got to think through this much more. Yes.
Yeshua said, who I set free is free indeed, and we're free from all of that.
Yeah, I think there's, you know, and I want to come back to that just so, yes, you're absolutely right. Yes.
Well, in fact, nice transition. Thank you. He said, my burden is light.
Yeah.
Because he is the word made flesh to dwell among us. He is the written Torah.
Right.
Keeping Torah is compared to man's rules is very easy.
Right.
But when man start putting his burdens on you, that's when the burden becomes heavy and why backs break and they walk away from God
Right.
because of man's rules. Whereas God's saying, it's not that tough, people.
Right. Yeah, and you know, look, when it comes to observance of commandments, look, I know that people I have, for instance, what I would call fences around certain things I do and don't do. But those are private. Those are my private fences. And you'll never see me come in here and tell you that a private fence ought to become your fence. Okay? That's different. It's okay if you have private fences. I have private fences on a lot of things. But those private fences aren't something I come in here and say, you need to have that fence, and you need to have this fence, and you need to have this fence. Sometimes, if you have a very precious flower or a child, you put a fence in the yard and you say, look, don't go outside the yard, don't go past that fence. And the fence is meant to protect and to provide protection. It's all good. But I can't say to you that my fences have to be your fences. It just doesn't work. Because I can't back them up necessarily from a particular text and say, this has the authority of God behind it. There may be wisdom in it, but I can't back it up with a verse. So because of that, I'll give you one. I'll give you a classic example. Give me a classic example of a fence. Not anywhere in the Bible. I don't meet with any woman other than my wife by myself.
But that's a good fence.
That's a great fence. I get women sometimes who call me up and say, hey, can we meet? No. Well, my wife and my daughter will have to be there. I've taken my daughters. I'm not going by myself. See, from my perspective, it's not going to happen. Now you can say, well, that's prudish. That's so crazy. That's so goofy.
That's
you know
protection.
What?
That's smart.
Fine. I don't care what anybody thinks. My devotion is to one woman, and that's where it's going to stay. And so, you know, I don't want any interference with anything else. Okay? So I'm just saying that's a safeguard. That's a fence. Now, I can't point you to a book, chapter, and verse that says you have to do that. But I will tell you this. I've seen people who don't do it, and I've seen some of the problems they get into. They have affairs, and they get divorced, and there's a lot of other problems.
Or accused of an affair that didn't take place.
Yep. Yeah, just the accusation. So you know what? That's a fence, but you know what? I'm okay with that fence. Now, I will, like I said, these are things, and I could go on and on about fences, but bottom line is, I don't come to anybody else and say, you know, you got to do my fence. You got to live by my fence. You have to do what you need to do on those issues. A lot of freedom, a lot of liberty. Yeah, question.
I'm really bad on reference. There was some place where she was castigating, some of the leaders that you lay on people and burden you yourself without even looking into them.
I think maybe Matthew 23. Check Matthew 23 out, because that's where he's casting the Pharisees in a series of woes. So it may be in chapter 23. But there's other places besides that. I'll have to look them up for you. There are some other places, yes, where he mentions this, the laying of heavy burdens without helping to lift them. So it's, yeah. Let me give you an example though, but let me go back to something else here real quick. This is important. Yeshua. Yeshua deals with a rabbinic issue in the issue of, we talked about fields, okay? What does the Torah say with regard to a field? You have to leave the corners?
Yes.
You can only go over it once?
Yes.
Anything you drop, you have to leave. And as you're going down the road, anything you pass by, you have to leave. Now, how much of a corner do you have to leave?
Doesn't say.
Doesn't say.
Your generosity.
Right? So the rabbis come along and say, well, we don't want to tell you, give you an outer limit, but we want to tell you a minimal limit. But they give a minimal amount that you're supposed to leave of the corner. Okay? All right. Now, what happens though? The Torah speaks to the issue of people who go out and they plant a crop. And now you're going to harvest this crop, and you have to bring some of that crop to the temple to help the Levites. The Torah doesn't address specifically the issue of, how many of you have seen these people this summer? You know what I'm talking about. These people this summer, that they got their family and their kids out, and they're picking berries on the side of the road, or out in some field, because they grow wild. How many of you go pick wild berries? All right, all right. So you have these baskets, bowls, right? They're like, right, picking berries. Man, the Torah doesn't address, you are harvesting, but you are not, you didn't plant it. It was planted by heaven, as the rabbis put it. The question becomes, do you have to tithe on that?
Well, you want a bowl of berries.
Yeah, I just want some berries. No, but the Torah asks, do you have to tithe on this? And here's what's interesting. He says, when it comes to the dill, the mint, and the cumin, those are things that grew wild. And he says, you should tithe on these things. Even though the written Torah didn't address the issue of things that grew wild. He says, you benefit from it. It's going to bless you. You harvested it, even though you didn't plant it. So you should offer some tithe off of it. And that's Yeshua saying this. Now that's not directly in the Hebrew Scriptures. It says nothing about harvesting things you didn't plant, because it's addressing people who are planting a crop. And here's an example where Yeshua says, hey, when it comes to what you've harvested, yeah, you ought to give some of that back.
Well, what's the command where it talks about when you're walking through, you can eat as much as you want, but you're not to take any of it?
Yes, that's talking about walking in grain fields in Leviticus, I believe it is, where you can, if you're hungry, you can harvest enough to carry in your hands, but you're not to take a sickle to it. That's major harvesting. So if you're walking, here's why. The land belongs to the Lord. So even the person that owns the land, it ultimately belongs to God. So if a person's walking by and they're hungry, you can take some with your hands, but you're not allowed to start chopping it all down, just go down a whole row. You take a whole row down. You can take enough to feed yourself for that moment. Not for, hey, I'm going to get tomorrow's and the next day's, and I'm going to do a half acre here while I'm here. No, not that. That's different. Subsistence, but not taking the whole, taking the whole thing. And the Torah allows for that. Yeah.
I'm just thinking that one point you can get from this is that having all these rules and regulations, it gives a loophole like people don't have to use their own common sense and their own sense of charity to do whatever. For example, well, why did you tell me to tithe? Why did you tell me to do this? Well, you should do it out of goodness of your heart. And so therefore it's like we can't follow the goodness of our heart. We have to go through all this dogma and all this. This way, that way, other way, but you just...
I think he gives us a lot of liberty, a lot of leeway.
Yeah.
So, all right, yes.
Is that why rabbinics tend to vote for Democrats, because they have that such control thing going on? Just wondering.
Wow.
I don't know.
Please stand with me. Top of page 95.